What's up, guys? I wanted to talk about something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, which is how important it is to remember sound before symbol. So meaning when you're learning music or when you're teaching music, remember it all comes from the ear at the end of the day. Of course, other senses are involved, you know, physical touch, your eyes for reading, which is what I'm talking about in the first place. But the thing to remember is that you didn't learn how to speak by looking at English. You learned how to speak by listening to your parents, your teachers, your friends. And that's how you learned your language, right? Well, music is a language too. So it's important to remember, and different people have different philosophies. I'm not telling you what to do. But when you're learning music as a young musician, or when you're teaching music, this is just my advice, don't focus too much on the symbol aspect of things until you understand what it's supposed to sound like. What I tell my students all the time is, you have to have a goal in mind. Anytime you're learning something, you want a goal. So when I'm playing something, I need to have a goal in mind, what that is. So if I'm trying to learn a chord or whatever, my goal is to learn that chord. If I'm trying to learn a chord progression. And so in my mind, I'm hearing that chord progression. Or I need to develop that first, where I hear it, you know? And then once you hear it, and you can kind of, you know what it's going to sound like in your ear. If you're a singer, you can sing it. Then by all means, look at what it looks like on paper. But it's just really important to remember that no one really learns music on a paper. All you see on paper is black dots that represent something. And so to understand what those dots represent, you have to understand the music you're trying to learn. That's why the best way to learn anything is listen to it first. Doesn't matter what it is. Listen to it and internalize what it's really sounding like, what it's trying to convey musically speaking. You know, the dynamics that are in it, loud and soft, the rhythms that are in it, you know, and just kind of feel the rhythms, play the rhythms on something, you know. You might think I'm being kind of silly, but if you're trying to learn something, it's good to break it down like that. Listen to it, hear it, feel it, internalize it, man. Because the more you have music internalized, the easier learning it will be. Now, this kind of works different for different instruments. So say you're learning piano. Piano is kind of the exception to this rule, because it just is. Piano pretty much has to be taught and learned almost pretty much through a book. Because there's just so much with piano, you know. You have all the notes on the keyboard, you have finger numbers, you know. So piano is kind of different. That's why piano is taught with sheets almost all the time, because it kind of needs to be taught with sheets. Because you just have so much going on that you need sheets. I'm kind of lost where I'm going with this chord progression. At first I was doing that little thing I wrote, but there's only so long you can do something before it gets old, so I was trying to change it up. I just got a comment. So I just think it's important that if you're teaching music, or if you're trying to learn music, the value of sound before symbol. And I'm not really explaining it that well. Not really. I'm not explaining it as well as I wanted to explain it. And it works a lot more with certain things than others. Like if you're talking about strumming, dude, strumming is a perfect example. If you're really trying to teach someone seriously how to strum on guitar, and you're doing this whole, all right, play down, down, up, up, down. Now you try down, down, up. You know, different people learn different ways, okay? But the whole downs and ups thing, that's the only way we can really show it on a piece of paper Well, unless of course we're talking about 1 and 2 and 4 and. We can also count it, obviously. See, the thing is I understand all the education that's behind counting and behind notation. But notation is just supposed to be a transfer of knowledge, not the knowledge. Meaning you take the sound and you have the transfer of knowledge to the ear. But it's best to try and learn it and listen to it first, so you have a better understanding of that transfer of knowledge. This just comes from experience, man. I'm just telling you what I've kind of experienced, especially with strumming. Like I said, this applies to some things more than others. So like if you're talking about strumming, listen to it so much, whatever pattern you're trying to learn. And try to imitate it, you know? Just try to imitate it. What did you do when you learned English? You imitated your parents, right? Imitating is the true way to learn anything, if you're talking about a language. So it could be anything like that. Any kind of strumming is really good to learn by just listening to it. Now, of course, when you're talking about chords and learning chords, it is good to have something in front of you. And when I teach chords to my students, I show them a chord chart so that they can relate the information of what it sounds like to what it feels like to what it looks like. I'm not saying a visual representation of what you're doing, which is what sheet music is a bad thing. But I do think the secondary part of this video needs to be there's different types of sheet music. And that's a very important thing to remember. You know, as music educators or as people who learn music, they get really intimidated when it comes to reading music because they think they have to learn what pianists read, the grand staff, treble and bass clef. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's just not true. If you go and watch any professional musician play, then they're more than likely not going to be looking at a treble and bass clef. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn treble and bass clef. I'm saying you have to think about what are you really trying to do. If you're trying to play guitar, you can argue with me all day long, but unless you're trying to learn classical type guitar, you need to focus on tablature, learning how to look at and read tablature and translate tablature to what you're trying to do on guitar, as well as chord charts, as well as scale diagrams for scales. So guitar has kind of its own notation, right? Tabs, chord charts, scale diagrams, and those are the three main kind of ones besides just a lead sheet chart. Lead sheet chart is like the ultimate for any instrument because it shows you chords and it shows you lyrics. So a vocalist can use it. That's why at the end of the day, lead sheets are really the ultimate type of sheet music. They just are. Unless you're trying to, it depends on your goal. Unless you're trying to learn Bach or Beethoven, then you do need all the notes that they wrote. It's sort of a cultural thing, but it's sort of not at the same time. So there's two parts to what I'm saying. One, sound before symbol is very important in almost all cases in music. Sound before symbol. And two, not all sheet music is valuable to everybody. A drummer is not ever going to read the grand staff, treble or bass clef, unless they're trying to learn another instrument. You know, like me. When I was a drummer when I went into college and I had to learn how to read treble and bass clef to play mallets and other stuff, you know? So I know you're probably thinking this hick is such a redneck for talking bad about sheet music. And that's the funny thing is that it's gotten to where you're condemned if you talk bad about sheet music. And I'm not really talking bad about sheet music. I'm just saying that the grand staff and the treble and the bass clef is not all that music is. And it shouldn't be taught that way. It shouldn't be taught that as soon as you meet a student, here's this grand ordeal that you have to learn. You have to learn the treble and the bass clef. Or if you feel like you have to play an instrument, you have to learn all that to even get started. It's just not true. And it's unnecessary. Now, as you're learning, it's good. And don't think I run a studio where I don't teach reading. That's not what I'm saying. It's kind of a deep conversation what I'm talking about right now. And no one wants to go there where I'm talking about right now. No one wants to go there because they know that if they start talking this way, people are going to think they're a hick because they don't want to focus on reading. When in reality, it's more about internalizing what you're playing through your ear and your mind and what you're actually doing. And the sheet music is just a product of that. So sound before symbol, man. So important. I'm going to give you one last example. One When I first started teaching drums about 7 years ago, I always showed students from the very beginning sheet music. And part of this has to do with age too. You know, adults are going to be able to work better on that because they're adults. They're used to reading things, while kids are not as used to reading things. You know, especially reading music. Obviously, it was the first time. In other words, the approach to just learning drums without any sheets is going to be what's best for a child. It just is. That's my philosophy. That's what I stand by. I wrote books, but these days I barely ever even really use them because, I'm be honest with you, I want the students to be passionate about music, have fun, come back and learn more. And if what you're doing stands in the way of those things, then are you actually really educating them to the fullest extent? You have to think about that. It could actually apply the same to piano. I'll be honest with you. I teach people sheets until they say, hey, can I learn this song? And then I say, sure, let's learn that song. And do I always have sheet music for everything I show them? No. Because the passion for music doesn't revolve around sheet music. And honestly, what I'm seeing lately is kind of scary. Because everything is going to a more digital way of thinking anyways, which is fine. But in the culture of music, it's kind of interesting how there might not be sheet music in the next 50 years. It might be replaced with something else. Like most people are learning from YouTube videos these days. And most piano teachers cringe when they hear that. And I'm not saying that's the best thing in the world. Sheet music is still the most productive way to learn anything because it does show you every single thing you're supposed to play on a piece. So at the end of the day, it is the best transfer of information. It's better than tabs, it's better than chord charts. Everyone knows that. It's not that I'm not debating that. I'm not saying that sheet music is not the ultimate way to learn something, but I am saying it can be a crutch when you're trying to learn as a musician. And it's just a deep conversation, man, that no one really wants to open up. So that's just some of my thoughts on sound before symbol, on a little bit of music teaching philosophy, and me trying to play guitar while I'm talking. So I'm forgetting my chord progression, so it doesn't really sound that great. So if you're trying to learn music, or if you're trying to teach music, if you're trying to teach music and you wonder why you don't have that many kids that are staying in your studio, you get a kid and you keep them maybe a month and they leave, you got to think about some things I'm saying, man. It's not just a business thing, it's also a passion thing. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do as a musician is you're trying to, one, have fun and learn about music, but for two, as an educator, you're trying to keep the passion alive for a student for music and the motivation to learn it. And, you know, generations change, things change, man. Look at the stock market. You used to have to pay a guy a commission to call and get you a stock. Now you can go on your phone and do it. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? Does it matter? No. Is it part of life? Yes. So I'm not saying sheet music is part of the past, but I am saying sound before symbol when you're learning and when you're teaching is very important. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.